January always seems to be the month that we get busy decluttering our quilt rooms and reorganizing our quilt rooms. Now, I did a lot of that in the past years, and my quilt room is really in a pretty good state and stays pretty organized. I have to do a little bit of work to keep it picked up a little bit, but I want to share with you 8 strategies that help me do this. Now, as always, if you have any great strategies for organization, please be sure to put those in the comments below. It's fun to see what others are doing to help keep their rooms organized. Now, the first strategy that I want to share is to be sure to declutter your quilt room. You need to declutter it and get rid of the trash. It's amazing how much trash hangs out in our quilt rooms. Now, once you get rid of that, then you can really work on decluttering next. Now, the decluttering, don't be afraid to get rid of things in your quilt room that you think you're not going to use. You know, we don't have to finish every UFO. If your UFO feels more like a chore than something fun to work on, pass it on to someone else or donate it. It's just silly for us to struggle with projects that we don't enjoy. So don't worry about that. Just pass them on. Get them out of your quilt room and free up some space in your quilt room as well as your mind. Now also, declutter your fabric stash. Get rid of those ugly fabrics. A lot of people buy fabrics on sale. They're not their favorite fabrics, but they think, oh, I can use that for a back. If you make a beautiful quilt and you put an ugly back on it, it's still an ugly back on the back of your beautiful quilt. So get rid of those ugly, ugly fabrics that you just don't enjoy working with. Now, the next strategy is really one that Wes and Jared shared with me. They did a video for me on and shared their top organizational tips. And one of theirs was that everything needs a place and there needs to be a place for everything. And I really have tried to incorporate that in my quilt room this year, and it is helping. Now, it is a work in progress, but it really has helped. Now, the next thing I want you to note in these pictures are that the organizational containers fit the space. It's a little eclectic. There's quite a collection of containers there, but these fit the space that I have. You want to be sure that your containers fit your space. And another important thing that you can see in these 2 photos is the importance of labeling your containers. Now, I like to use see-through containers so I can easily see what's in those containers. But it's important to label the containers. Once I labeled the containers, whenever I go to get something, I know where it is. And when I go to put it back, I know where it goes. So be sure to invest in a label maker and use those labels. And you don't even have to invest in a label maker. You can just use paper and pencils and some tape and label your storage containers that way. You don't have to have a label maker, but they sure are fun to use. Now, the 5th tip, which was a real game changer for me as far as getting my quilt room organized as well as boosting my creativity, and that was to make my fabric visually accessible. Now, I moved my fabric, the main portion of my fabric, into these cabinets. I arranged it by color, and I can open these doors and see all the fabric that I have. And it really is just easier to use, and it's just easier to create when your fabric is visually accessible. Now, the next thing I wanted to mention is to be sure to make your difficult storage areas accessible. And I'm going to show you an example of that. Now, here in this picture, I have a storage space that's between my cabinets but underneath my table. And I used to have to get down on my hands and knees to get under there to get the boxes out. As you can see, I put them on little wheeled dollies that came from Harbor Freight. I put a handle on there, and I put a hook on the end of a dowel rod, and I can pull them out and push them back in there without having to get down on my hands and knees. So be sure you're making your storage accessible. The next strategy I wanted to mention is be strategic on where you place your items. Be sure that your most frequently used items are the most accessible. For example, I don't use my flannel fabrics very often, so I don't put my flannels in this cabinet. I put them in another cabinet that I don't use very often. Also, my wool fabrics and my wool applique stuff, since I haven't been doing a lot of that in the past couple of years, I've put that down on the bottom shelf behind some other things. So the things that you use the most, be sure you can get to them easily. The last thing I wanted to mention is don't forget to take advantage of your vertical storage space. Here you can see how I've used some vertical storage space in my quilt room. Now the first picture is how I store my rulers and my design boards. I love to keep those within reach. They're close to my cutting table, and that works out great. This next picture is a picture of my magazine rack, and I use it as vertical storage. This rack came from Hobby Lobby, and it's just a great way to store those magazines so they're up and out of the way. And I do try to limit my magazines to that space. If it gets full, I have to take some out before I put any more in. The next picture shows the end of my ironing station, and you can see all the wonderful storage space. And then the last one I wanted to share with you is the storage for some of my tools that I put underneath my cabinets that are in easy reach when I'm sitting in my chair sewing. Now these strategies have worked for me, and I think these are great strategies that you can incorporate in your quilt room. Now don't forget to tell me if you have some great organizational tips. Put those in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And until next time, have fun quilting.